Press play. He's the voice of the intersection of marketing, tech, and popular culture. Thinking is his commodity. DJ, data punk, stylish sock collector, and author of the book Disruptive Marketing. Jeffrey Cologne is your host of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds.
If it's Friday, it's another episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. I'm your host, Jeffrey Cologne, broadcasting live from the campus of Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. Hope you had a good week. A lot of fun things going on out there. The first social CMO named to Twitter, Leslie Bertrand, who worked at American Express on a number of marketing initiatives, now named the Chief Marketing Officer for Twitter. You can read about my point of view on this, and I'm definitely in favor of Leslie being Chief Marketing Officer. I think she'll bring a lot of social experience and empathetic experience as a storyteller for the platform. On this week's episode, we're going to talk about, does marketing automation make us more creative? Staying inspired in the cognitive economy. Some tips on how to do that. And of course, some inspiration for innovation quotes, as we like to leave everyone on every show that we do here, so that you can go out and be inspired. All that and more on Disruptive FM. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Disruptive FM, or you can participate using the hashtag DisruptiveFM. A lot of great things this past week that happened in the world of marketing. Of course, we noted that Twitter has named a new chief marketing officer, one that is very social in her skill set. I think will definitely help turn a corner for the company. At least the only place they can go now is up, which is a good thing. That leads us to our first discussion on this week's podcast, which is marketing automation good for creativity? And the reason that the topic of Twitter really lends itself well into this one, just to set context, is Twitter is filled with a number of what we call bots or robots, automated accounts that many times will like your tweets or retweet your tweets if you've actually mentioned certain keywords or topics. And many of these organizations that use this type of technology maybe don't necessarily use it in the most enhancing ways. But there are definitely some great ways that automation can be used. So the debate is, does automation allow us to actually be more creative or less creative? My thinking here is that it actually allows us to be more creative. And here's why. Automation frees up the ability to think about new ideas, new possibilities, new areas of inspiration. You couldn't necessarily do that in the past because you had to do a lot of that work by hand. It was manual labor. You had to schedule a blog post. You're going to pretty much write that blog post, schedule it, and push it out to an entire ecosystem. The wonderful thing about automation is the creative work still must be done, but the work of scale can now be put into software. This is the power of programmatic if we actually think about it. However, a lot of marketing officers, I think, haven't really taken well to this. They've looked at automation as a way to actually outsource creativity. In some respects, that's the last thing that you can outsource. It actually reminds me of back in the day, 2007, 2008, when many of these marketing officers, marketing directors, anyone with marketing in their title, and usually with the name digital or the word digital before that title, would say things like, oh, social media marketing is wonderful because it's free. Of course, what they didn't understand is that it wasn't free. Sure, you didn't have to pay to get onto a news feed on Facebook. You didn't have to pay to get your video onto YouTube. You didn't have to pay to tweet. However, the work that went into that content around the context for your audience, that still costs something. That is the creative drive, the creative vision, the creative strategy that isn't free, no matter how much we think it might be. Automation isn't necessarily free, even though we might think it is. We pay for these services so that it allows us to give us more time to do other things that are essential for our job and the success of our organizations and companies. So I find it interesting that now the same marketing directors, marketing officers that thought social media marketing was free now think that automation will help them cut or reduce costs. Sure, that might be the case, but they should reduce costs on the operations side of their marketing, not the creative side. That's the side we still can't automate. One of the other things that was interesting this past week is thinking a little bit more about the cognitive economy. And what I mean by this is most of the things that we dream of, that we think about maybe when we go to sleep at night, or possibly think about when we're overstressed at work, or possibly bored at work because we're looking for some new opportunities, is do we ever have imaginary ideas that we think could become reality? If you think about it, almost everything in our economy that is really driving the economy has come from our imagination or someone's imagination. Steve Jobs, of course, came up with ideas of what to do in terms of making the phone your computing device. Of course, he wasn't solely involved in that vision. He, of course, borrowed from other influences. However, it was his imagination that made all of those influences intersect into what ultimately became the iPhone. The same thing is true when I had a conversation with Chad Hurley many years ago. He had told me he just wanted a solution so he could share some video with friends coming off a weekend where they were at a wedding together. And he couldn't do that. A file was too big, there was no compression software. It was hard to share these moments with others. So he thought, well, how if I could upload this to a third party somewhere, then we could all access it. And the rest, of course, is history in terms of how we've watched or engaged with video. Many of the things that we have to think about in the cognitive economy really are around what inspires us. How do we stay inspired? There's actually an image I shared on LinkedIn not too long ago that's up to about 300 plus likes. And in it, it actually talks about the purpose economy. What are you not necessarily passionate about, but what's your purpose in life? When my great-grandfather came to this country, he didn't think about purpose necessarily. He had to eat. Same with my great-grandmother. So they became farmers and, of course, worked tireless jobs, anything they could do to get paid. When my mother and father graduated from college in the 60s, they wanted to do things that they were good at, but they could also make a living off of. So my dad became an economics professor, and my mother became a psychologist. When I graduated from college and moved into the real world in the mid-90s, I didn't want to just do things that I was good at or that could pay me. I also wanted to do things that gave me passion, what I enjoyed, things that I could actually add to the equation. And now, students graduating from college, pretty much in the year 2000, let's say 13 up until now and probably continuing for the next 10 years, will add a fourth dimension. What does the world need? This is really important to think about because it's not a matter of just building applications anymore because we think it's a great application. Is it an application that can actually serve the greater good? And in some respects, this is why we live in a cognitive capitalist economy, because it's not necessarily about building things to just make money to survive like my great-grandparents, but it's really to build things that can move the needle in terms of us as a species, the other species on the planet, and the planet itself. Think about that when you're trying to find inspiration and purpose in the modern day. And finally, I'll leave you with some inspiration for innovation quotes as we do on all of our episodes here on Disruptive FM. I sort of picked this nice little book to always pull from. For those who happen to be watching the video, you can see it, but it says on the front cover, imaginative, innovative, inspired. And of course, I love to just sort of open this up and read various quotes from it. Welcome problems and eat them for breakfast. There is more to life than increasing its speed. You can analyze the past, but you have to design for the future. And finally, one that I think a lot of people who work with data and solely data should learn from. Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. I'm Jeffrey Colon, your host for Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Check us out on Twitter at Disruptive FM. And of course, check out my upcoming book, Disruptive Marketing, What Growth Hackers, Data Punks, and Other Hybrid Thinkers Can Teach Us About Navigating the New Normal, out on Amazon Books in August.
You've been listening to an episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes. Purchase a copy of Jeffrey's latest book, Disruptive Marketing, on Kindle, hardcover and audio. Signing off from the city of Seattle. Press pause.